Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. It is the 16th of March. It's a rather dull day today as I kick off show number 223. I think it's probably just about a year since we started. I must have double checked that. I can't quite remember when it was. But don't forget, you are more than happy, more than welcome to submit a comment or a question. Anything that I'm going to talk about today, let me know your views. We've got some interesting stories. Basically, more manufacturers are suspending operations in Russia. Rising fuel prices, one expert has said, pick a number as to how they could go. Royal Enfield have launched a new bike, the 411 Scram. After 4 decades, Honda are resurrecting the cult Dax. And a story which particularly grabbed my attention, actually, a disabled Deliveroo rider's wheelchair adapted trike was trashed by yobs, yet a crowdfunding scheme has managed to actually cover the cost of a replacement inside 24 hours. I'll tell you a little bit more about Survival Skills Mini Ride Out. So I did promise you that last week and forgot to prepare it. We'll look at a US e-cycle manufacturer who's moving into e-motorcycles. And today's discussion point, if you can't go electric, how can you save fuel on the bike? I'll give you some practical tips for getting the most miles out of your litre. We have people looking in already. We've got Kevin, we've got Paul, Alex, Clive, and have already looked in, and Nigel's here too. And Paul says 2 years since Elevenses first started. It must be now or about. I can't quite remember when the first one was. I'll dig out the original tape and find out, but it must be just about coming up for the year's anniversary. Right, so don't forget, settle yourselves down with a brew and stay with me for the next 35 minutes or so. Right now then, so all right, first story of the day. Well, as you've probably heard, the sanctions are piling up against Russia in response to the invasion of Ukraine. And Harley-Davidson were the first motorcycle manufacturer to react, apparently. They released a statement that read, in the light of the crisis in the Ukraine, Harley-Davidson has suspended its business in Russia and all shipments of bikes to the country. Our thoughts continue for the safety of the people of Ukraine and those impacted by the crisis. Harley were rapidly followed by fellow American brand owner Polaris, who you probably know are behind the Indian motorcycle brand. And according to the Bennett's Bike Social pages, Ducati, BMW and Honda are the latest motorcycle manufacturers who joined them in announcing an immediate suspension to business interests in Russia as a direct result of the attack on the neighboring Ukraine. Ducati have stepped back from Russia in line with the decisions of the parent company, which is Audi, you probably recall, and they share policy with the broader Volkswagen group. Honda's decision is said to be driven in part by the removal of Russian access to the SWIFT international payment platform. Perhaps the most significant move comes from BMW Motorrad. The company sells more motorcycles than any other across the nation. And the German manufacturer actually has a manufacturing plant in Russia, at least one, I'm not quite sure how many. And the decision has been made by the BMW group to suspend exports of cars and motorcycles. Meanwhile, MV's Augusta's CEO is Timur Sardarov, and he's actually Russian, and he has actually announced his anger at the actions of his home nation in invading Ukraine in an open letter distributed by the Italian manufacturer. I'm not sure that the cessation of motorcycles will desperately impact Russia, but hey ho, I suppose every little helps, as they say. Right. The consequences to the UK, of course, and many other Western nations is the impact on fuel prices, given that Russia exports a considerable amount of oil and gas via a pipeline in the case of Europe. Now, according to the latest forecourt figures, the restrictions on Russian exports have driven the petrol prices at the pump here in the UK to a record high. The average cost of a litre of petrol was 163.5 on Sunday, whilst diesel was 173.4. Now, as I mentioned a couple of shows ago, I've certainly seen higher prices here in London. Um, but how high will it go? The bad news is that the Treasury Committee has been told earlier this week that prices could increase even more. Experts told MPs on Monday that petrol could reach £2.50 a litre, while diesel, around 18% of which comes from Russia here in the UK, that could hit £3 a litre and may even need to be rationed. Nathan Piper, who's the head of oil and gas research at Investec Bank, said that consumers need to get ready for continued price rises in fuels. Asked how high the cost of fuel could go, he said, not to be flippant, but pick a number. So all that looks pretty grim, doesn't it? Let me know what the prices are in your part of the world. I'll be interested to hear. We did pass one cheap petrol station on the way back from Uffington on Sunday, and unfortunately, we didn't stop thinking that our local Asda would be cheaper, and it wasn't. So that was a bad decision on my part. Right. Okay. So yes, let me know what you think about that. As I say, I don't think things are going to get any better anytime soon. On a more cheerful note, though, I did actually travel out to Uffington in Oxfordshire to deliver the first of my in-person talks for 2022, and it was to the BMW Club on Sunday. Now, I think I mistakenly said it was a Rosper group last time I was on, but I got confused because it was the same organizer who set up two different meets. One I did last year was online via Zoom, and this one was actually in person. And I have to say, I was very pleased to meet Paul Varnsbury there too. Nice to meet Paul at long last. We've been talking online for quite a while. He's been a regular contributor to ELEVENSES over the 2 years it's been running, and I've also corresponded with him on protective clothing matters for a number of years prior to that. There was a good turnout from quite a few riders turned up on bikes since the weather was actually considerably better than the forecast suggested. But it did seem, frankly, that the local council were actually determined to keep me away because diversion after diversion resulted in me doing a near circumference of or circumnavigation of the village before I found the way in. Anyway, I added about 15 minutes to the journey. It meant I was in a bit of a rush to get set up before they actually started their meeting. And I forgot one vital point to remind my partner Judy to actually take some photos and perhaps even a video clip to prove I was actually there. So there's no evidence of my attendance apart from one thing. I was very kindly given a BMW pin, there it is, by the organisers, but unfortunately no photos as I was delivering Crash Course to them. Now, Crash Course, it was a talk I originally designed to produce a somewhat different approach to roadcraft talks generally. It was for the Ride Skills Multi-Mode Training Days at Brands Hatch, which I delivered there between 2013 and our COVID truncated year in 2020. Now, I don't know about you, but I have sat through rather too many well-intentioned "we'll teach you to ride better" style roadcraft talks over the years, which haven't really given me anything new, even if the reminders are valuable. But since everybody at Brands Hatch really wanted to do the hands-on stuff, we have modules on first aid, there was a slow riding and emergency stop session out on the hard standing, there was an observed ride with the IAM, and of course there were the two track sessions, and those were the things that grabbed everybody's attention. So really, it was doubly important to come up with a presentation which got people engaged. And I think by and large, I succeeded. Now, Crash Course, asks why, after 70 odd years of bike training, the old RSEACU scheme launched in the early 50s, and some of the toughest bike testing standards in the world, there's little evidence it's had on the way the riders actually crash. Now, my thinking is that it's because we approach riding skills from doing all the right things. And of course, that's all very well, but it doesn't actually help us when things don't go the way we planned. Now, I do tend to try to turn the standard approach to road safety on its head. And rather than argue that somebody who falls off must be poorly skilled or badly disciplined, the survival skills approach is to tackle it from the opposite end, and that only if we understand how people make riding errors is it possible that we do something to our own riding to mitigate the risks. The choice of name survival skills really wasn't an accident. It was what basically kept me alive as a courier. So that's the thrust of Crash Course. It's to take my audience through an inside-out view of the 3 standard crash scenarios. That's junctions, overtakes, and corners, and try to see for ourselves how a crash could develop in each of these situations. So for those of you who know me well, you've probably been aware that I've taken some of this thinking from air crash studies and pilot training, and that's is definitely an element in this particular talk. Now, as it happened, there just happened to be a chap called John in the audience who also happened to be a pilot, and he commented at the end of the presentation how similar my thinking was to the way that light aviation is now thinking about flight safety. Well, yes, it would be, as it's based largely on what has been discovered in flight safety. But as it happened, he invited me along to attend a meeting tonight of the General Aviation Safety Council, which is happening at White Waltham Aerodrome near Maidenhead. So I'm going to toddle out to that later today, and I'll report back on what I learn from the aviation world. Meanwhile, if you happen to be a member of a group or a club, please do mention my talks to your organisers. I'll happily drop them a line, discuss the options, run through my choice of talks. I've got several which I can deliver. And as on Sunday, I can deliver them in person, or I can go via Zoom. Right, okay, a couple of comments. Paul says it was a pleasure to meet me and Judy Uffington. Thank you, Paul. It was certainly nice to meet you. And he has some nice words there about the presentation. Thank you very much indeed, Paul. On the let's take that banner off. That should be down by now. On the fuel price thing, Alex rightly says that the majority of fuel price is government tax. It is. It's duty plus a VAT on the top. There's nothing much that we are likely to be able to do about duty because that money goes into the government coffers and keeps other things running. But what I would say is that the VAT goes up on the combined price of the duty and the pump price. So VAT could be adjusted to save customers some money, because at the moment, not only are the fuel companies pocketing some cash, but so is the government. So I would definitely agree with that. And Kevin says he paid 179.9 for SO Supreme yesterday. Well, that's 182.9 down the road at the moment, so you're still getting it cheaper than me. Right, okay, so moving on, let's talk about some motorbikes. The Royal Enfield Himalayan has gained a loyal following over the last few years as a capable, go more or less anywhere, do pretty much anything kind of motorcycle, even if it'll all be done at a fairly gentle pace. And perhaps not too surprising, Royal Enfield have capitalized on the latest update to the Himalayan, which adds Euro 5 compliance to the bike. And what they've done is they have released a stripped down model. Let me get the picture up. There it goes. It's called the Scram, which is a fairly unusual name. Scram is a sort of bit of an archaic slang term these days for getting out of somewhere. So whether that was in their mind, I have no idea, but that's what it's called. Now, both bikes, the Himalayan and the Scram, are designed here in the UK by Harris Performance, and the starting point for the machine is that word platform. Now, it's a term you're going to hear a lot more of over the next few years as development of petrol engine bikes stagnates, as we get ever closer to the ban on tailpipe emissions. So the Scram takes the existing frame and engine, the platform, from the Himalayan. The exhaust system is also straight off the Himalayan, and with a few tweaks turns it into a more road-oriented machine. Now, the 411cc motor on the bike is unchanged. It's a single cylinder overhead cam, 2-valve, air-cooled, long-stroke motor. It produces a maximum 24 horsepower at a relatively lowly 6,500 RPM, and you get 23.6 pounds-feet of torque at an even lower 4250. So it's not a rev monster by any stretch of the imagination. And that's why it only needs a 5-speed gearbox, chain drive to the 120/90 17-inch rear wheel, which is propped up by a monoshock suspension unit. The front end is a 100/90/19 front wheel, so that's down 2 inches from the 21-incher on the Himalayan. It's also hung under slightly shorter forks, all of which reduces the wheelbase and steepens the steering head angle slightly. As a result, the perch that you sit on is around 5 millimeters lower, so it's around 795 millimeters or 31 inches. And something I immediately noticed looking at the bike, I'll zoom in on it again, is that you actually get something of a proper pillion seat on it. I'm a bit of a fan of riding bikes 2-up, and one of the things I look at with horror on many modern motorcycles is the truly appalling accommodation for a passenger. On that, you get decent sized pillion perch and a good grab rail. Now, both ends have more suspension travel than most bikes, but it does get lower bars as well, which suggests that the target is less remote jungle, mud trails, and more urban pothole jungle. Brakes are single disc at either end, twin piston caliper at the front, sliding rear piston thing at the back, dual channel ABS. Now, interestingly, one report suggests it's only 3 kilos lighter than the Himalayan, which I suspect means either the Himalayan was actually heavier than previously publicized or someone's miscalculated somewhere, seeing as a lot of brackets and crash bars have gone missing, as has the rack at the back. I can't imagine all that has only weighed in at 3 kilos. As it happens, the Scram is reported as weighing in at 185 kilos or 408 pounds dry, which I'd actually say is pretty porky for a wee single. By comparison, my little CB250 RS, which is a 27 horsepower air-cooled single, weighs in at a mere 273 pounds, I think it is, dry. I'll leave you to work out what the kilos are. And my 1990 GS500E, still one of my favourite bikes actually, put out more than twice the power of the Scram. It's got twice the number of cylinders, of course, and that weighed in at just 169 kilos, 373 pounds dry. So that was 16 kilos lighter for a considerably bigger engine. I know they've got to have a catalyzer in a modern exhaust, but hey-ho, even so, modern bikes just seem to be getting heavier and heavier. Now, owners of the Himalayan reckon on around 85 mpg, which doesn't sound too bad, but of course it is at the expense of top speed. You might hit 80 with a following wind, but the 15-litre tank rather should push you around 250 miles before a fuel stop becomes essential. Anything else you get? Well, not a lot really. The equipment is basic. The rack has gone missing, which is a bit of a shame. But you do get the Tripper turn-by-turn navigation system, which increasingly features on other bikes in the Enfield range. I'm always happy to see an analog speedo. To be honest, I don't really like digital jobs, but the small LCD panel in the middle of the speedo does give you some extra info: trip meter, clock, and fuel gauge. And rather annoyingly, it also reminds you if you've not had your bike serviced. It's a 3,000-mile interval, so the chances of that coming up on screen, I would imagine, are quite high. You do get a 3-year warranty. No price from Enfield yet, but since the Himalayan starts at 4,699, I'd hazard a guess you may be getting these at around £300 less than that for the base single colour model. There will also be a two-tone option available at extra cost. It's expected the bikes will be in the dealers sometime late spring, early summer. Right, so if that doesn't tickle your fancy, how about a cult mini bike that was last seen on sale something over 4 decades ago? There it is. That is the ST125 Dax. The motor on the bike is actually the same single overhead cam 124cc air-cooled motor that is in the Grom, but it hangs this time from a pressed steel frame, which actually doubles as the fuel tank, and it closely resembles the original bike. There are modern touches: the wrong way up forks, front and rear discs, alloy wheels, of course, LED lights, and LCD dash update it, but you still get the sort of chromed heat shield on the exhaust, the chrome mirrors, and the general impression is very close to the original machine. I quite like them actually. I've always, whoops, invalid image. Well, that's annoying. All right, let's just go back to the old one then. And yeah, okay. So I'm quite fond of these bikes, I have to say. You know, I could see myself riding something like that if I was in town. You only get 9.25 horsepower. I guess that 0.25 is actually very important. Spinning a 4-speed manual box via a centrifugal clutch, so it should be a doddle to ride. And the motor will push the bike to about 55 flat out, which should be enough for the shorter urban commutes and the occasional back road ride as well. You should get around 100 plus fuel consumption from it, miles per gallon, as the bike only weighs 107 kilograms, 236 pounds fueled up. But I suspect the claims that the 3.8 litres of fuel can take the bike 149 miles are nudging wishful thinking, because that would be 175 mpg. Price is yet to be announced. The Grom is 3649, so I can't imagine it will be very different from that, and Honda should have those in the shops by mid to late summer. Right, okay, now I promised you an update on my mini ride outs that I've got planned for later this year. Now here's the idea. I know some riders have put off group riding by high-speed, crash-happy reputation that comes with big group rides. So I'm planning something rather different. These will be limited numbers. I'm planning on taking 5 people maximum on bikes, a leisurely pace, so it should be fine for an A2 bike without any problem at all. I might even manage to do the odd one which caters for a 125 and on L plates. There'll be relatively short distances, absolute maximum 100 miles, probably rather less than that. And they'll either be morning rides, in which case we'll get a decent mid-ride break to have a rest and a socialise. We'll try and get some good food in too, either sort of decent brunch or a lunch somewhere, but not a greasy spoon. I'll be avoiding the main sort of the typical biker stops, to be frank. And if I could possibly manage it, I'll try and actually wedge in an extra stop at a farm shop in case you fancy some nice organic sausages or something. I'll also set up some evening rides. Now they will probably run from about mid-May through till late August. It all depends, of course, on the hours of daylight we have. The trouble is, the earlier in the year you run them, the colder it tends to get in the evening. So I tend to skew them towards the summer and autumn rather than the spring. But anyway, the point is that we'll start these from locations around the M25, possibly out from Oxford as well. The idea is to get out onto some interesting scenic roads quickly and to avoid main A roads. They won't be fast, as I said. They'll be interesting little roads to have some fun on. First 3 dates are in the diary. The first one is Saturday morning, April the 23rd. That's St Albans and over the Chilterns. And then the next 2 are May 28th, when I plan to go out from Epping and up into northeast Essex and just probably dip into the bottom of Suffolk. That's a lovely ride. And then we'll do Beaconsfield and the Thames Valley on June the 25th. So put those 3 dates in your diary. And if you can't remember them, if you've forgotten them already, you can head over to my events page here and you can find the first one is bookable already, and the other two I'll get up as soon as I can. I'll be adding the evening dates in due course. A couple of other points: the rides are weather dependent, so if it does look like it's going to be a soaking wet today, we will postpone them. They're meant to be fun, and it's not much fun riding in chucking it down rain. They are pre-book too, so no turning up with a bunch of mates on the day. If you want me to put a ride together for you and a few friends, do let me know. I'm happy to do that. If the ride's fully booked, drop me a line. I'll put you on a reserve list and offer you a place on a repeat ride. But if you can't make it, let me know and I can offer the ride to somebody else. You will be riding with an experienced trainer, of course. I won't be offering any training, but I'll be happy to discuss anything you're interested in talking about while I'm there. And I might just have a copy or two of my books available to buy. So no daring do, just a nice, quiet, pleasant ride. Whilst we're doing new bikes, have a look at this one. Let's get past the invalid image. Here we go. No, actually, oh yes, there it is. That's the one I was looking for. And why they're out of order, I carefully arranged them to get them to order. So that is the Super 73 C1x Concept. Super 73, who are another manufacturer you probably never heard of. They're, quote, an American lifestyle adventure brand based in Orange County, California, that develops products to help fuse motorcycle heritage with youth culture. Quite a task they've set themselves there then. They're founded in 2016. They have a range of e-bicycles, and this particular machine is said to blend the line between an e-bike and an e-motorcycle. It's has a top speed of 75 miles per hour, so it's definitely at the motorcycle end of the spectrum, and it is designed to be street legal. Now, it falls somewhere between a bike like the Dax that we've just seen and the conventional motorcycle in size, since it's actually sitting on 15-inch wheels. That's not immediately obvious from the photo, and it runs a short 51-inch wheelbase, which is just under probably about 9-10 inches shorter than normal, so say 4 to 5 centimeters for those who think in metric terms, and that's claimed to provide agile handling and performance, although sourcing tires might be a bit of an issue. The seat height remains around 31 inches, which should suit all but the tallest riders though. Now, range is quoted as 100 miles or thereabouts. There's no word on the power output, but can't be that bad if it gets to a top speed of 75. Super 73, so they've come up with a new fast charging system, yet another new fast charging system that can bring the battery up to 80% in less than an hour. Now, right now it's still a concept, but the company hopes to release it sometime in 2023. There's no pricing information, but you can reserve one of these bikes for a mere $73. I suspect there'll be a lot more to pay on the day of delivery, though. If you want to find out a little bit more about the Super 73, go and have a look at their website here. Right, Alex says if you're up north, let me know if you fancy a ride. Yep, good idea, Alex. I'm hoping to get a couple of training courses in, actually, up in the Peak District, so I'll keep you posted on those. Now, okay, don't forget, if you're tuned to Elevenses here with Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. I've already gone live, haven't I? I pressed the wrong button there. This was the one I meant to put up. If you have missed a show, you can either catch up live the recording here on Facebook, or you can head over to YouTube, where they are all in a channel, so they're rather easy to find and go back through if you want to catch up with some of the older shows over there. So, next story. If you've been following Elevenses for a while, you probably know I'm no great fan of the fast food delivery riders, having had a few near misses with them over the past. Because even though I was a courier for myself for many years, their antics, frankly, look like the average 80s courier looked positively tame. But I had to include this story for two reasons. It shows, first of all, how some of the mindless idiots mess around on the fringe of bikes and continue to give motorcycling a bad press, but also how supportive the riding community can be in a time of need. Now, David Capoletti works as a Deliveroo rider in Bristol. Um, and he's paraplegic. And what he uses is a motorized wheelchair to get about. But to contain his wheelchair whilst he's actually riding, he has this specially adapted scooter, which basically is like, allows him to ride the wheelchair into the back of it, and then ride the scooter in a sort of a relatively normal fashion. Or rather, he had that particular bike because on Thursday it was stolen, and late that night it was found smashed up. And that's, I have seemed to have lost the photo of the crash. Why has that gone? Oh well, never mind. That's another thing altogether. So I'm not quite sure where the photo of the crash has gone. Um, but anyway, point being that Philippe Chagas, who's a fellow rider and a friend of David's, he's set up a fundraising page to try and help him pay for a new one-off machine and to support him until he can get working again. Now, remarkably, it took less than 24 hours for the fundraiser to reach the £5,000 target, which it managed to get to just before midday on Saturday, March the 12th. The new bike's being built to order in London. It's likely to take something over a month to finish. And I know how difficult it was to keep the bills being paid when I was off the road with a major engine blow up and not enough cash to buy a new bike to keep working while I was fixing the old one. So I've actually made a small donation to him myself. Right, okay, so don't forget, if you do enjoy these shows, you can consider making a small donation over on my Coffee page. You do get a bonus for that because it opens up 800 odd articles on better biking. And if you become a subscriber with a regular payment, you get access to even more. But here's a free better biking tip for you today: how to save fuel and get more miles from a tank full. Now, as these fuel prices are soaring, many of us will be wondering how we can squeeze a bit more distance out of a litre of this ever more expensive commodity. So here are some simple suggestions, assuming you're not in a position to ride a smaller and thus more frugal bike, or even go electric. Now, the most obvious answer is to ride less. Now, whilst we still want to enjoy our bikes, it may be possible to combine some journeys. So maybe you're on a ride out, that's fine, great, go for it, enjoy it, but maybe you can do a little bit of shopping or something on the way back rather than have to make another journey. Just think about how you can plan your rides, basically. Check your routes. Now, what a lot of us do when plugging a destination into the GPS is that we rely entirely on the GPS to take us from A to B. And what a lot of people will do is set it for the quickest route, not the shortest. Now, the interesting thing is when you actually look at the different options, you'll often find there's actually only a few minutes difference, but you may save a lot of miles. I still recall a bike trip in southern France where the leader simply set the GPS to the quickest route and followed it without ever checking the route against a map. And it ended up turning what should have been a 75-mile direct ride across country into a 125-mile ride because the GPS took us out sideways to an auto route, down on 50 miles of auto route, and then back in sideways to the destination. When I checked later, it saved 5 minutes, but it was about 5 litres of fuel wasted. Similarly, think about routes that go round cities and think about routes that go through cities. You won't be held up by traffic so much on a bike as you will in a car. My route to my Kent starting point is 40 odd miles if I go round the North Circular Road. It's 25 if I go through the middle of London, even avoiding the middle bit where you can't ride anymore. Next suggestion: ride more slowly. That's not very appealing to the average motorcyclist, of course, but do remember how speed goes up, particularly on a naked bike, because wind resistance is a square of the speed. So instead of sitting on the motorway at 70, drop it down to 60. It'll take you a few minutes longer, and maybe you won't be overtaking all the big trucks quite so often, but you will make some useful fuel savings. The XJ's fuel consumption actually is pretty steady at around about 55 mpg, but it can squeeze about an extra 5% out just by slowing down this much on motorways. Now, in town and on twisty roads, the trick is to accelerate more gently and to try to maintain speed rather than braking heavily. It doesn't mean getting your knee down round corners, but what it does mean is just being more gentle on and off the throttle. Try switching the engine off if you're in town for more than a few seconds. It'll all help. One tip here as well, watch what you're doing with the rear brake. Now, a surprising number of riders actually ride with their foot on top of the rear brake lever. I do it myself, but what I've done is I've adjusted the brake lever to a lower position, so it's not actually engaging the brake. I see riders all the time with their brake lights flickering on and off, and this is because they're actually dragging the brake, and that will cost you fuel, as well as wearing out your brakes, of course. Something else to think about, don't assume that the engine will use less fuel in top gear. Now, car engines are generally designed to produce maximum torque at relatively low revs, and that's where they are fuel efficient. That's why you'll often get a fuel economy light or dial or something to tell you where to change up. And if you watch the sort of readout, you often find that the fuel consumption drops if you switch to a lower gear, even if you're driving at the same speed. The Skoda I drive from time to time does that. Not a lot, but it is a little bit of a saving to get into top gear. But motorcycles are slightly different. Top gear is definitely appropriate for cruising on A roads and motorways when you don't need acceleration. But trying to get up into top gear all the time at round town speeds won't benefit you on fuel economy, because you'll just be using big handfuls of throttle to get the bike to go anywhere. Let the engine rev a little bit more, let it go a little bit more freely, and you'll find that actually that improves your fuel consumption. You can also make sure that the bike itself is in good nick. Now, flat tires are one thing that you can tackle very easily. They won't help fuel economy because they will create a lot of drag. So get them up to pressure, but don't overinflate them on the grounds that if right pressure is good, more pressure must be better. You still need grip and stability, and it will impact that if you overinflate your tire. Now, here's a forgotten tip. I never see this mentioned, but check the brakes too. Get the bike onto the two wheels and simply push it. Just roll it backwards and forwards. It should roll perfectly freely. If you feel any kind of resistance when the engine is in neutral, then the brakes are binding. It may be the front brake. You'll feel the front of the bike dip slightly when you're pushing it forwards. It may be the back brake. You'll feel the front of the bike rise up slightly when you drag it backwards. Now, with a modern motorcycle which produces a reasonable amount of power, even the 47 horsepower of an A2 bike, you're going to be oblivious to this whilst you're riding. But those dragging pads are making you hold the throttle open just a little bit more. They are eating into your fuel consumption as well as wearing your brakes out, of course. Now, none of this will actually cost you anything except your time, but there are some of the steps you can take to look at the bike. The other mileage eater is the chain. If it's clean, tensioned, and lubed, it'll be at its peak efficiency. But if you've not kept it in good condition all winter and it's a rusting mess, I would simply bin it now and fit a new one. Now, here's something to think about. A lot of people will throw up their hands in horror. A non-X-ring chain, a plain chain, you can buy those in the strengths that suit big, powerful motorcycles. They're used by racers. They won't last as long as a sealed chain, but they will spin a lot more freely while they're in good condition. So you will have to replace them more often, but they won't impact your fuel consumption like an X-ring chain does. The motor itself also needs to be in good nick. Poorly adjusted valves will mean the engine is not running at peak efficiency, but frankly, they tend to be hard to do except on basic air-cooled bikes. So if you haven't got a service scheduled, and it's not something you do yourself, I think it's probably beyond what you can do easily. But if you can fit them easily, a new pair of plugs or set of plugs won't hurt, which is a memo to myself. My XJ's plugs have been in a while, and I even have a new set which I bought 2 years ago on the shelf waiting to go in, so I probably ought to get those in. An oil change won't hurt either, but don't overfill it. A lot of people think that topping it right up to the very top of the level must be better than topping it up to the lower mark. But as long as it's in the middle somewhere, it really won't matter. The more oil you have in the engine, the more internal drag you tend to create. If you've not checked the air filter in a while, now would be a very good time. And even if you've had the bike service, check it too. I've known unscrupulous dealers slip that one by the owner because you actually have to unbolt things to find it. That alone can give you a 5% improvement in fuel consumption. And I would use a reputable brand there, not something that you've never heard of before that's 10p cheaper on eBay. They won't be as good, they won't float as much air. The original equipment one's generally best, but something like a K&N would be pretty good too. Finally, something I've never seen in any of the other articles, which always seem to be cribbed from things written with a car in mind, is that it's the bike's aerodynamics that are the killer for fuel consumption. Motorcycles are actually less aero than a brick, honestly. That is absolutely true. Nakeds, particularly customs with high bars and high riding positions, are the worst of the lot. So do what you can to improve the bike. If you are in the habit of going out with your aluminium top cases and side boxes on when there's nothing in them, you are simply chewing through petrol. Take them off. Get them off the bike. That will improve the aerodynamics of the back of your machine no end. Don't wear loose, flappy clothing either. It creates a surprising amount of drag. That's why it flaps. If you tuck that things like loose jeans into boots rather than wearing them down the outside of a boot, that'll help. But racers actually wear skin tight leather for a reason. So if you can get some, if you've got snug fitting clothing, that will help on a longer run. Fly screen is not a bad idea. If you've got a naked, even a modest improvement to the airflow around your body will add a little fuel economy. And think about what you're doing with your body. Think about what racing cyclists do. They get themselves tucked in out of the wind when they are trying to get maximum speed, maximum efficiency on a time trial. You can do the same on the bike. Even little tricks like tucking your elbows into your side rather than sticking up in the air like that, get them tucked in, it'll help. Get your knees tucked in against the tank. If you've got your knees dangling in the wind, they are acting as sails and they are slowing your bike down. Put it all together and it can really pay off. Now, I have a bit of experience here. My Hornet normally manages about 150 miles on a tank of fuel before it runs dry. Now, on one memorable occasion in France, it was a Sunday, and I'd carefully plotted a 24/7 fuel station to top up the not very big tank on the Hornet after we'd been out for a long day's riding. I knew exactly where I was going to refuel. I knew that I would have plenty of fuel to get to the filling station and plenty of fuel to get back to where we were staying overnight, only to discover that there was a major cycle race taking place in the town, and the access to the petrol station was on the closed side of the road. So I simply couldn't get to it. A quick scan through the route map showed us that because we were in one of the least populated bits of central France, the nearest petrol station was about 50 miles in the wrong direction. And I had about 80 miles to go back to the tent. I thought, well, I don't know if that petrol station is actually open, and even if I get there, then I've got to get back to the tent, and I'm not going to make it. So basically, what I did was I kept the speed down. I avoided braking and accelerating out of bend. I tried to maintain speed wherever possible, but I tried to be ultra smooth on the throttle, and I got myself right down behind the screen on the straighter sections, and I actually managed to get the tank range up to 186 miles. And I know that because next morning the bike was just spluttering as it ran out of fuel as I rolled up to the pump of the only open filling station I'd found in 100 miles. So there you go. I got from 150 to about 186 miles So that's a fairly significant improvement in fuel consumption just by riding very carefully. Right, okay, so that is it for today. Don't forget we have the upcoming Science of Being Seen presentation. It's the full one, which covers visual perception and the problems of motorcycle conspicuity. Yeah, I explain why high-vis clothing isn't and day riding lights haven't proven entirely successful at preventing junction collisions. So that is on Wednesday, the 6th of April at 2000 hours. You can book a ticket for that particular event here. Let me just get that up on screen. There we go. And the one after that will be in May on overtaking. So there's a couple of comments at the end of the show just to cover. What was the MPG calculation at 186 miles? It was something mid 60s MPG, I think, if I remember correctly. It's just over a 3-gallon tank on that bike, if I remember right. I can't remember specifically, but yeah, I think it's 2.7 gallons main tank and about 0.3 of a gallon reserve, something like that. So yeah, something over 60 mpg, better than the 50 odd I normally got out of it. Right, okay, so yeah, that's it for today. Don't forget, you know, if you have anything to say, I will happily get back to you after the end of the show. Please do feel free to drop me a line. Anything else I wanted to say? No, not really. If you're out there riding today, do be careful, stay shiny side up, and I hope to see you for the next show, which will be on Sunday. And if I can get my sign off video up, I will. It's here somewhere. So thanks for looking in. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and this has been Elevenses. See you for the next show.